Hello, Star Wars fans, and welcome to another episode of the Jedi Way here on the Outlaw Nation channel. I am the Outlaw, John Rocha, but always for these Star Wars shows, Boba Fett, joined as always by my co-host out of there in Chicago, Laura Kelly. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing very well. It's getting a little chilly here, which is nice. I can wear long sleeves. It's great.
Yeah, that's a cool one. I like the red and black design. I haven't seen that one before, so it's pretty badass. Where'd you get that one?
I had a buddy sneak me into Lucasfilm a couple of years ago, and I popped into the store and bought this bad boy. So yeah,
Nice.
I like to rock this every now and again when it gets a little chilly out.
Right on. Yeah, I know it's still hot here, so we're still in the 90 degrees where we're at, and I miss the cold weather, so I'm waiting for the cold weather to come on in. But we got so much to talk about today, Laura. You know, we had a new Mandalorian teaser trailer drop during Monday Night Football. I think Monday Night Football, yeah, during the second game between the Cardinals and the Cowboys. And then we also have these two new books that have come out deal with Star Wars. So we're going to talk about all of that throughout this episode here, kind of break down what we saw in the trailer and see if there were some things being teased, and also what we might be seeing and not be seeing in this second season of The Mandalorian based on some of the hints in the trailer. And then, of course, getting into these books and talking about some of these revelations that are canon about these relationships or about these new concepts that are being thrown out there into the world of Star Wars. What was your week? What's your week been like with Star Wars this week? Have you been diving into a lot of things? I saw the new Force Toast podcast episode went up. What else were you discussing?
Yeah, so we recorded that on Saturday. It came out on Tuesday. And you know, it's kind of funny because we always talk about it on the show. I'm like, we never remember what we talk about once the episode comes. I'm like, I have to go back and like write the recap and tweet the promo tweets for it. I'm just like, what the hell did we talk about? So it's no different. But yeah, we did. I remember we did mention, you know, like there's going to be this new Mando trailer that comes out. We're not going to capture it in this episode. So all of the new exciting things that you all know when this episode comes out on Tuesday, we're not going to know while we're recording. Turns out there wasn't much to find out.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But I honestly, I'm not going to complain. I know a lot of people are complaining because the Mandalorian trailer was kind of just, or the special look or exclusive look that premiered during Monday Night Football was kind of not a lot of new content. There wasn't a ton of new stuff in that trailer that we hadn't already seen. There wasn't a ton of new dialogue. A lot of it was, you know, stuff that we heard in season one. But I just don't have a problem with that. I love that they're like holding back and that they're pumping the brakes and like not revealing too much, like barely revealing anything at all. I have no problem with this. What did you think about it?
I liked it, and same thing with you. I don't want to see anything till the show drops, right? Just like when and I don't mean the trailer was, yes, get me invested in what they're going to do in the second season, but I don't want to see any reveals. That's what I enjoyed about episode 1 when it was released on Disney Plus, getting to see Baby Yoda for the first time along with everybody else and experiencing that. I thought that was awesome. Of course, the UK people didn't get to experience it until months later, but for those of us who did get to see it when it dropped, it was a great surprise. There's nothing that beats that moment where you shoot off the couch and go, oh my God, Yoda, Baby Yoda. All of that, you can't replace that moment. And it's rare to have those moments nowadays in the world of geekdom and nerddom, especially when you have people who work for multiple sites trying to break scoops to keep their jobs and to, drive traffic to those websites. It's tough to keep things under wraps. And even the Hollywood Reporter, Disney has not officially confirmed that we're ever going to see Boba Fett or Ahsoka Tano, or these are all speculative things that we're hearing throughout, or Cobb Vanth that we've been hearing throughout. So I'm glad they didn't spill any of that in this trailer, kept it pure. We're only days away from this thing coming out. Like it's about 10 days away from coming out, or 9 days away from coming out. And that's exciting. So I was a fan of that. But we did get some teases throughout about the possibility of more Mandalorians coming in, about maybe a Boba Fett situation coming down the pike. We got the Mithril back. What does that mean? So there was enough here. And we got more with Cara Dune and Greef Karga. Whether you like it or not, we got more with them in it as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the great, you made a lot of great points that we haven't gotten a ton of official information from Lucasfilm or from Disney on this. We've seen a lot of, leaks or I guess exclusives from sources like the Hollywood Reporter and Deadline and Slash Film. But until it's confirmed by Lucasfilm, you kind of like some of it you don't know if you can really buy into it yet. So I'm excited to be sort of going into it a little blind, maybe even more blind than we were in season 1. But I was thinking about how last year I was in Portugal, like just on a girls trip with friends when The Mandalorian came out, and I didn't know anything about it because I couldn't get access to it in Europe, and I was so mad for the week that I was there, and I was feeling out of the loop. So I'm happy to be back in the country this time when it actually is coming out. I'll get to be in the loop and be watching it at the same time as everybody else. I'm excited.
Right. Well, what'd you think about the myth roll showing up here? You know, great job of Horatio Sands. We recently did a rewatch of season 1 to discuss it after the first big trailer dropped a few weeks ago. We discussed it on the show. It was great to revisit that first episode again and see what a great job he did with that character. Great voiceover work, great body work. The whole acting thing he did was fantastic for this. Now, somehow bringing him back, will it be in the first episode? Are we going to, what planet are we going to that's connected with this guy? Why would they break this mithril out of the prison that he just brought him to at the beginning of the first season? What's your speculation on that?
So I've got a couple of ideas.
Okay.
In the first season, we learned that I think it was maybe the first episode, Mando gets paid in Mon Calamari Flan,
right?
Which led many people to speculate that Mon Calamari is somewhere near Navarro, which I think is the planet he was on. That it must be at least somewhere in the same system or in a neighboring system. So I think that I've also heard speculation that the ship that we see that's on the open sea in the season 2 trailer could potentially be Mon Cala. We see a bunch of Quarren walking around on the ship, and then we see a bunch of other what sort of look like aquatic species moving around in that area. So that's an idea that maybe he has to break him out for some reason, because maybe he's got some sort of, he's got those, I don't even know where that sort of species could come from, but maybe he's some sort of aquatic species too, and there's a connection between him and Mon Cala, and maybe that's where they're going, and who knows. But I think as far as like the first episode, I almost wonder if we're even going to get Grief Karga or Cara Dune in that first episode. I'm kind of thinking that for some reason I have in my mind that that's going to be like a lot more focused on like the baby and on Mando and kind of where they are and where they've been. Like, are we picking up exactly when season 1 left off? Has there been a little bit of time? Right. What have they been up to? What's the status of the Razor Crest? We see it in the trailer that it's definitely taken a beating at some point this season. So I'm excited to see, where it starts off, but that's kind of where I'm leaning, is that hopefully that we kind of jump back in slowly, more focused on our 2 protagonists than some of these other side characters. Yeah.
Another thing that's interesting too, is that we saw in the trailer, he is being pursued or comes into run-ins with fighters on both sides. The X-Wings and the TIE fighters are in that trailer. It looks like from the way they edited that 1-minute teaser that the X-Wings are the ones that force him down onto the planet and crash landing on that planet. We don't know if that's 100% true, but we do hear Razor Crest, stand down or whatever. And so is that something here that you see? Is he operating fully as and dare I say it, as an outlaw? Operating, kind of doing his own thing outside of both of these powers that are occurring. Because we're not done. Clearly, even though it's 5 years later, we're still not done with the Empire, which will eventually become First Order, of course. So where are they operating from? Are these ragged groups that have gotten together? What's the deal with the Alliance? How are they handling things? So it seems like he's going to be kind of dancing in between both.
Yeah, and I wondered when we saw those, or when we actually heard the pilot and the X-Wings and this new teaser, if maybe one of them was going to be one of the pilots that we saw in season 1, which were played by the directors of the season 1 episodes. I couldn't quite tell. It didn't sound like Dave Filoni that was in there, but who knows? I'm really excited about that, because I think when we first saw the season 2 trailer, I think many people thought like, oh, maybe he's working alongside the New Republic. Maybe these X-Wings are escorts that are working alongside him. But it sounds like now that's sort of been that's been confirmed that they are. It sounds like kind of they're more shooting against him, I think, in this situation. So he's got everyone coming after him. He's got the Empire, and who knows if maybe some of these TIE fighters, if they're affiliated with the group of people that we saw in Navarro, or the remnants of the Empire that we saw in Navarro, or if this is a completely new. Are these little subsets of former Empire people popping up all over the galaxy in the Outer Rim where they are? Or is this, an extension of the same group we've already seen? It'll be fun to see.
Or even maybe are these people that took over these abandoned bases from the Empire and are using these TIE fighters for their own benefit? And we don't know. Are they unidentified people who've come in and kind of taken, or have they bought these TIE fighters? Anything is possible. Right? Anything is possible here at this point. The TIE fighters don't necessarily have to be connected to the remnants of the Empire or the beginnings of the First Order. Could just be some I don't know, some vagabonds, some criminals, some whatever contingent of group that can take these TIE fighters once they see them lying around at these abandoned bases that I imagine would litter the galaxy once the Empire was defeated. So I don't know. That's something to kick around. Maybe, probably not true, but you never know. You threw out another things here. I'm looking at our notes here. Large dead ice spider on the Razor Crest. Whistling birds in action. Talk to us about that.
Well, this is kind of fun. We heard the whistling birds in the original season 2 trailer. We didn't actually get to see them. So I thought that was an interesting choice that they actually showed them in action in this exclusive look. I would have thought that they would maybe hold something like that back, but it's something we've already seen. So it's not, too big of a spoiler. We knew the whistling birds were coming back again. So I'm glad that we actually got to see that. We got to see, Baby Yoda's little reaction to it, him hiding in his little case again, which is always delightful. And then, but yeah, it was really strange. I think a lot of people were sort of speculating is this ice planet Ilum? Is it Hoth? Is it anywhere we've been before? But I don't recall seeing large ice spiders in either of those. And maybe he's not on the snow planet in that scene, but there's these, they look giant, almost dog-like size. There's a dead one that's parked on the Razor Crest at one point during this exclusive look, and then you can kind of see, if you pause at just the right moment, you can see that there's an even bigger one that almost looks like it's wrapped around the ship. Which is terrifying to think about. We've seen spiders in Star Wars before. They're always scary, but this looks like a new breed. So who knows what this is going to bring to the table.
It could also be the ice planet Maldo Kreis, which is where we originally got this mithril captured by the Mandalorian there. So would they be going back to that planet for some reason? I don't know. So it's just crazy. You're right. We don't know what ice planet this is. So something's going to be involved with this as well as it progresses and we get more about Grief Karga, Cara Dune. Seeing more of them in the trailer this time than we did in the 2-minute trailer. So what does that tell you? Are you cool with this? Are you looking forward to something? Do you think the Grief Karga situation might turn on the Mandalorian? Is he looking for to establish himself again as the lead of some bounty hunters? What do you think I don't know what he might be, what we might see from this trio?
It's an interesting idea that Grief Karga would have gone back to, doing anything, I guess, without the Mandalorian. They seemed like such a good, solid core group at the end of season 1. So it's kind of funny, we see Mando approaching Cara Dune and Grief Karga in this new trailer, and I think in the original one too, where it kind of looks like, the two of them been on adventures together and working on certain projects, and the Mandalorian's been kind of doing his own thing and meets back up. So I'll be curious to see kind of where Grief Karga is in his, in his many adventures that he seems to be having. I imagine that because Carl Weathers is going to be directing an episode this season, that will maybe get a more Grief Karga centric story. Right. If I were directing an episode and I got to make some decisions on what my character was doing, I would probably put them more in the forefront myself. So I'm excited to kind of see what he brings to the table in his directing, but also maybe we get a little bit more development about the Grief Karga character, maybe a little bit of backstory, how he got to where he is running this, this bounty hunting squad. So it'll be fun, I think.
Yeah. Are you concerned that we still haven't seen any of Giancarlo Esposito in any of this stuff, or do you think that they're holding everything back or till later on in the season? What do you think is happening with that?
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't really think about it because we hear him in the first trailer of season 2, and it didn't occur to me like, oh yeah, we don't actually see him at any point.
Yeah.
But I think he does most of the voiceover in that first trailer, so it just didn't occur to me. I think that we're going to be in for a treat with him. I think that, it's been interesting to see. He's been doing a ton of press about The Mandalorian. We don't get a ton of press about it. between season 1 and season 2, we haven't heard much from anybody. Pedro Pascal has picked up a little bit and did some stuff with Vanity Fair recently, but Giancarlo Esposito has been he's been talking to the press about Mandalorian a lot since season 2 allegedly, I guess, finished filming. That would have been February. I feel like we've heard from him several times. And he seems very excited. So I'm excited to see what he's excited about. I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more of his character than what they're showing in the trailers, which, you're right, is essentially nothing.
Yeah. It was a little bit shocking for me to see throughout. Like, well, we get nothing because we were left with so much with him at the end of season 1 with the dark saber and everything like that. So kind of surprising. Do you think they're teasing a confrontation with him and Boba Fett? This idea of to find other Mandalorians, and this idea that he has Baby Yoda. Just because these Mandalorians helped Din Djarin on that planet doesn't mean all the Mandalorians are necessarily going to help him in what he's trying to do. Maybe someone hires Boba to go get Baby Yoda or the child and bring it back, or him or her back to whatever they need to do and get paid for it, or whoever hired them so they can get paid for it. That could be interesting as well throughout. Maybe there's another man. And we saw that tease, with the Ming-Na Wen episode of who walked up and was checking everything. Looked like a Mandalorian as well. So is that Boba?
Yeah, I think it's going to be exciting for Boba Fett fans. I'm not personally a huge Boba Fett fan. I think when he starts talking about, seeking out other Mandalorians to help guide him, my first thought goes to Bo-Katan Kryze. So I'm hoping, we've heard these rumors of Katie Sackhoff being cast as live action, the character that she voiced in the Clone Wars, Bo-Katan, which should just be like the most exciting thing I think to see. Because I think it'll be instantly recognizable to a lot of people. But she's also still like a vague, like obscure enough character that they're going to need to take the time to sort of explain who she is. And I just love the idea of all these new fans that are new fans of The Mandalorian getting to see this badass woman Mandalorian character, like sort of a counterpoint to Din Djarin, especially since she's, takes off her helmet on the regular and everything that we've seen of her in animation. So that interaction is something I'm really excited to see, assuming that we are actually going to see it. I kind of, the thing with Boba Fett is I feel like we heard something about Timothy Olyphant at some point wearing the Boba Fett armor. So maybe it's not necessarily Boba Fett. But then we've also heard these rumors of Tamara Morrison making a return to the Star Wars universe. So it's all up in the air, and they're keeping it all very confusing, I think, and they're doing a good job of doing, of keeping it confusing on purpose, is what I'm guessing. To sort of, steer us away from what could potentially be coming. So who knows what to expect when it comes to Mandalorians?
Right. Exactly. It could be both. It could be Sabine too. Could be these Mandalorians coming together in some way to help him through this situation. And would you be disappointed if they all of a sudden, how can I say this correctly? If they J.J. Abrams retcon the idea of him not taking off his helmet, if he sees Bo-Katan or Sabine like constantly taking off their helmet, and of course there were those rumors that he stormed off the set because he wasn't allowed to take off his helmet as often in season 2 as he would have liked. Do you think they'll try to like destroy that whole idea that they really made a big deal about in season 1?
I don't know if they're going to retcon it. I have a feeling that they're going to. I think it's going to prompt some really interesting conversations. I love the idea that we've got this super orthodox Mandalorian who was raised with a certain creed and raised with a certain group that is very, they're very much sticklers about keeping the helmet on. And then we as Star Wars fans, at least those of us who have watched the animated series, have become very, desensitized to seeing Mandalorians without their helmet off. It was this whole concept of there being a Mandalorian that's so stuck in his ways about not removing the helmet under any circumstances is such an interesting concept to me as someone who watched the animated series. I just love the idea of there being an interaction between those two groups and trying to figure out, like, does Bo-Katan recognize this, like, very orthodox Mandalorian that like, oh yeah, they're one of those people that doesn't take, I don't know. I just am excited to see it. But I think that these rumors of Pedro Pascal storming off, I think have been debunked. So thank goodness it's, out of control. Stupid, but
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But no, it could. You brought up something I hadn't even thought about until you said it. This idea of, because we saw that certainly in Star Wars Rebels when Sabine went home, there were like sections and pockets of people who were more, how can I say this, more conservative, more rigid about how they saw the world versus a little more freer approach group there in the battles over Mandalore, the political and military battles over Mandalore. This idea that the Mandalorians could have sex, S-E-C-T-S, sex of them. I want to make sure I say that correctly. Sex
definitely need to clarify.
that could be a little more, as you said, orthodox, could be more hardcore. Oh, he's one of those hardcore Mandalorians. Their armor is different color, maybe. Their armor is different look. So they're more the hardcore Mandalorians. We're more the looser Mandalorians who don't have an issue with taking the helmet on or off. So yeah, could be very interesting because once again, the Mandalorians are taken from certain places. They're not all necessarily born as Mandalorians. So that also could encourage this idea of different approaches to this way of being this Mandalorian entity. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be really fun. I still question if like Sabine Wren would ever show up, if Ahsoka would ever show up in this series. Like I understand what they want to achieve is that, he needs to seek out the Jedi, and for some reason he wants to seek out other Mandalorians first. Maybe it's so that he has some kind of personal guard with him before he goes to seek out these enemy sorcerers. Or maybe he just wants to get a little bit more of the history of like, hey, do these Mandalorians know anything about this, race of people called the Jedi? Yeah. So I'm excited to kind of see where the history kind of plays into it, because what we know is that the Empire's put a lot of effort into really squashing down downplaying like the Jedi and their history and their legacy and the good that they did for the galaxy, to the point where we meet Rey 30 something years later, and she thought that they were a myth. So I think that this is going to be, it's going to be an interesting play to sort of see how did we get from where we were in the prequels to where we are in the Mandalorian, to then how does Rey think that these people were somehow mythological? Right. So I think it's going to be fun to see this, this is going to be season 2. And I think, and maybe even season 3, this is going to be a great, point of connection to sort of just tie this big story all together of, seeing how the Empire really put that effort into to erasing the Jedi from history, essentially.
Yeah. Well, we got all that from a 1-minute teaser trailer. So let's let you know, even though we thought there might not be much in it, but it seems like there might be a lot being teased here that we're all going to get to start seeing next week. So on the 30th, and I'm sure Laura and I will have discussions about how we're going to handle that for the show. Are we going to review the episodes or review them in chunks at a time, or just wait for the whole season to be done and then review the whole season? We shall see as we go along here on the Jedi Way. All right, Laura, let's move on to the second section of the show here. And that's to talk about these 2 new books that have come out here that are connected to Pablo Hidalgo. These new books here from Star Wars that have jumped out. There's a book called the Star Wars Book. Its authors are listed as Pablo Hidalgo, as I just mentioned, Cole Horton, and Dan Zier. Hope I'm saying that right. And there's some highlights here. There's some more. They go into more of the characters, some of the history and the technology of Star Wars. There's some focusing back on some of the characters that we know about, some of the organizations we've heard about, events and species. There's also this discussion about dyads between Kylo Ren and Rey and Palpatine, and how that works, and this idea of the younglings now being called the younger, as if there could be younger than younglings, the even younger younglings being called the initiates. So this is some fascinating stuff that was brought forward into here. As you were looking at all this, because obviously the book hasn't 100% come out, or we haven't read it 100%, but like as you're seeing some of these articles that are talking about this stuff, what stands out for you?
Well, that little bit about Force dyads with Kylo and Rey was really interesting to me. So James Floyd wrote this article for StarWars.com, and that was the first thing that he highlighted, was that, this healing, transferring power that we saw depicted in the Rise of Skywalker between Rey and Kylo was somehow related to their dyad. He referred to it as a dyad ability in this article on StarWars.com. So this was really interesting to me because we also see Baby Yoda heal in The Mandalorians, which begs the question, is it only a dyad capability, or is it something that other Jedi can have individually as well? And in that case, who is the other half of Baby Yoda's dyad? So I really liked that little bit. It's so interesting to me, and I think that I really hope that they dig a little bit more into this, into what that detail is in this book. But some of these other things that they talked about in this article weren't necessarily news to some people who've maybe read some of the more expanded universe stuff. Initiates came up in Dooku Jedi Lost in the audiobook that came out, I believe it was last year. Or the year before. We heard we heard a much younger version of Dooku referred to as an initiate before they became Padawans. But I think that was the first introduction to it. And I remember it striking us as unusual when we discussed it on Forced Host.
Yeah. I mean, I thought so too. And ding me for that. I hadn't heard or listened to that one and heard it. So when I heard it the first time, though, man, it's interesting when you talk about Star Wars and you look at these things, and it is very much about being recruited once you achieve. I don't know, once you achieve a power or once you achieve possible promise, you are recruited into this lifelong battle against either evil or good, depending on your perspective. And you have to weigh in and contribute in some way, And so this idea of initiates isn't even strong. The initiation, you're being brought in, you're being put through the ringer to move on to the next level, right? It's like what is it, like Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts. There's always these rankings, or the military, right? I was in the military, private, specialist, sergeant, master sergeant, whatever, all through. So you hear all that kind of stuff. So it's just interesting how, and look, I don't want to go too far in the comparison, but you see this in third world countries when they're fighting these rebellions. They're taking these kids and they're putting rifles in their hands at very young ages. You're essentially training these young initiates to eventually be holding a weapon like a lightsaber to fight and defend themselves or to fight against evil. So that was a fascinating path for my mind to walk down as I was looking at this.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting that you brought that up of the concept of trials. We're seeing that in the new Thrawn book, the Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising book. The concept of the trials also exists within the Chiss Society, which takes place all outside of the galactic borders of the core galaxy that we all know and love. And I think that when you bring up the Jedi and you talk about how they take these kids away at a very young age to begin training them for this, and this. It really always kind of circles back to, were the Jedi doing the right thing by ripping these kids away from their families and training them to essentially be warriors? They call them peacekeepers. We can call them warriors. You call them whatever you like. Is that, it also brings me to the question of, in the High Republic, are we going to see that practice still in place 200 years before all of the stories that we know and love at this point? Is that going to be something that started more recently with the Jedi before their downfall? At the end of the Clone Wars, or has this been going on for 200 plus years? I'll be curious to see that when all of that content starts coming out.
Yeah. And there's new details about the First Order's origin that's in the book as well. It had obviously it started inside the New Republic. Agents of the First Order helped push for a stronger centralized role of the New Republic government, which in turn caused a political stalemate, forcing systems that feared losing control of their autonomy to break away from the New Republic in a coalition called the First Order.
Yeah, if anybody wants more information on that story, you can find that in Star Wars Bloodline, a story by Claudia Gray, a very, very good book that you get a lot of. It's sort of, I want to compare it to like the sort of political breakdown and intrigue that you get in the prequels, but it's all about the New Republic, and it's about Leia and how she ended up sort of breaking away from it because of, basically these people who ended up probably becoming, more closer to the First Order, I guess. But it's an interesting way to see it broken down. So it's nice that we're going to get to see, kind of an overview of that in this book as well.
And we get some signets of Mandalorian houses in this book, which is pretty cool. House Vizsla, Clan Eldar, Clan Mudhorn, all those, House Cast. Like, that is also fun too. You know, the the idea of Mandalore, the Mandalorian warriors and you know, characters that have been throughout Star Wars. I'm so glad that I'm still around and still here to finally see more of this being fleshed out in multiple media, more of this being exposed and explored. So for me, that's exciting because, look, I've said this before in other Star Wars shows. I will always hold to this. I believe the Mandalorians are the Latinos of the galaxy. So I've always held that in my own head as Boba Fett. That's you know, there's vowels in that name. So to me, that's always been a thing that's Latino. So this idea of having them be more highlighted, and of course having Pedro Pascal be the Mandalorian kind of reaffirmed that for me even more. So seeing that we're getting more of this kind of stuff, more of these, I can see these being tattoos, these signets on people's arms already, and so that excites me to have more of that being explored as we go along with this with the Star Wars franchise.
I love that thought that like the idea of the Mandalorians, like that made it relatable to you. That's so fun. It's like there's, you know, that's something that you specifically saw and sought out and held on to, and I just think that's
look, there's not many Latinos in sci-fi for many years until recently, so you kind of you have to find them where you can in your head or create them, you know.
Exactly. You just got to make it up as you go along. And that's what works. That's the great thing about sci-fi and fantasy. But I think that's one difference between this book and then the other one we're going to talk about today, which is that this book, the Star Wars book that's by these three authors, including Pablo Hidalgo, is going to include content from The Mandalorian, from Rebels, and from Clone Wars, whereas this other book that Pablo Hidalgo had come out, I believe it was last week, this is, I think it's solely focused, it sounds like, on the 9 Skywalker films specifically. Yeah. It doesn't even sound like we're going to get a lot of content from Solo or Rogue One in this. It's going to be specifically the Skywalker saga.
Yeah, what stood out from you as you were looking at this? Because this is the one that you kind of texted me about. You approached it in a place of saying Star Wars trivia, which of course we all know you're a master of Star Wars trivia. You brag about it on your Instagram all the time. So it's like, it's great. So like, what were some of the trivia stuff that stood out for you? Did you already know most of the stuff that you've been seeing here being reported that's in the book?
You know, this one, I think they've been a little bit more tight-lipped on, which is nice about, you know, what we can expect. Pablo Hidalgo did this great interview with Sci-Fi Wire a while back, talking about kind of what we can expect from this. And so I was reading through that, and I love that, you know, he brought up Star Wars trivia multiple times. So as I was reading it, I just was like, I feel like he's like talking to me. Like, I feel like I'm being like targeted in this, which I'm not. He's probably targeting Alex Damon specifically and like wanting him to read this book. But I was just like, oh, I feel like it's me. So I ended up buying it. I have it here. Okay. I haven't actually opened it yet, but I'm really excited to read into it. It's 208 pages long. We're looking at stories, tidbits, general behind the scenes information is what Sci-Fi Wire has revealed about this. It's going to be more than just a list of chronological facts. There's going to be actual stories, both in universe lore and, you know, sort of behind the scenes information about what was going on. And then a lot of concept art, it sounds like, too. So I'm excited about this. Pablo Hidalgo is a 20-year veteran of the story group, so he's seen a lot. Yeah. I'm excited to get more insight from him.
That's for sure. I mean, you mentioned the interview he did. One of the things that stood out for me is they asked him about what is his favorite fact about the series. And he said, quote, "I always found it weirdly poetic that natural storms hit the production of 2 of the original trilogy films, Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. And yet when they and Star Wars New Hope is what he means. And yet when they finally needed a storm on screen and created a controlled sandstorm for Return of the Jedi, they ended up cutting it out. It was the first scene shot and the first scene cut for that film." So this trivia is not necessarily just about like, oh, what's the ship number? What's this, that? This is behind the scenes trivia about how all of these films were made and some of the tidbits that haven't been released yet about the intricacies, the ins and outs, the stories behind these little things that have happened, some of the close calls, some of the happy accidents that have happened to bring about all these films to the screen.
Yeah, I think I'm excited about this. You know, I think that, you know, I kind of wish that I could find PJ, one of the writers at the Schmodown, and just tear it away from him and make sure he doesn't get anywhere close to it, because behind the scenes questions in Star Wars are notorious for tripping people up. They've definitely tripped me up in competitions before, so I'm sure there's going to be a ton of content in here for them to pull from. So I intend to dive deep and to definitely reference this. I think Pablo Hidalgo talked a lot about how he's contributed to these hardcover, visual dictionary type things. And this is going to be a departure from that. It's going to be a great, addition to that collection, but it's not necessarily going to be that same thing. So I'm excited to dive into that. The behind the scenes stuff is always so fun because you get these, documentaries that are sort of included with some of the DVD extras, and you get the commentary tracks if they're included on the movies, and that's where you can get a lot of this behind the scenes information. But there's, even in the visual dictionaries, there's not a ton of that content in there. So books like this, I love that we have two of them back to back, that Pablo has reduced these, or has, helped produce these books that are coming out this week and last week. This is great for us trivia nerds.
One that's dives deep into the actual events within the movies and the canon of some of these stories and some of the added stuff that's been circling around, getting put in and kind of connected to things that are occurring within these stories, and then stuff going on in real life making these films. So having these, you're absolutely right, having these as a 1-2 punch, essentially a partnership, is a great thing to enjoy, as we're all, for the most part, working from home and trying to entertain ourselves in any way possible. This is a fun way to do that with both of these books. And that book, the trivia one, is $15.99. As Laura mentioned, it came out last Tuesday on October 13th. It's called Star Wars Fascinating Facts. It's a great design, the book itself. This kind of turquoise cover with the yellow and white and black writing. It's so well done. It's an attractive book as well, that you want to pull off the shelf. Really smart. It's a bright, vibrant book. You just want to pull it off the shelf and read it. It's tempting to the eye. So it's really smart how they did that as well.
Yeah, it's great. And each of these entries is kind of like, it looks like it's sort of just like a page. It's like a little blurb that you get on each page for each thing. So you can kind of just open it up and read a page a day right before you go to bed. That's my post-season study method, I suppose. For the evening, as TikTok can only get one so far, scrolling before one goes to bed. I shouldn't be doing it for 3 hours, but here I am. So I've got this. I've got some actual homework that I can be doing.
Before we wrap up, we got to wrap up in the next few minutes. I want to ask you about this idea of the dyad. We mentioned earlier, the dyad stuff is really kind of in my head now, this idea of the dyad. And this idea of Yoda. Do you have... Because your mind is always going, Laura, and the Force Toast Pod, you and Alice are always thinking of answers to some of these questions. Have you already had this kind of late night thought before you passed out that made you shoot out of bed and think about who the child, #Baby Yoda, could be connected to in terms of a Force dyad?
What's weird is that I didn't think about that until we were talking about it just now. It really didn't occur to me.
A lot of rumors have been saying that the child could be a clone. And remember that Rey was supposedly, and Palpatine was a daughter of Palpatine and all this kind of stuff. And it's there was rumors that Palpatine was a clone. Snoke is a clone. Palpatine wasn't, but Snoke is a clone. So is this a way to kind of make this dyad come to life again, keep the clone aspect of it somehow involved, and Baby Yoda is not what we think he or she is?
Well, I think we saw a little bit of those Imperial scientists wanting to mess with him in some way. It looked like they were just doing body scans. It looked like the one scientist was particularly preoccupied with making sure he was alive, which is something. So I think that I wonder if that'll be something that plays out, but I almost wonder if they would save that till is that going to be a little cliffhanger in this finale of the series or something, 2 seasons or 3 seasons down the road. But yeah, I think that it's really strange to think about, because you've got these two in the rise. It's such a stark contrast, to the Rise of Skywalker. You've got this young baby. It's weird to think about him having anything sort of similar to the relationship between Kylo and Rey, which ends up being this romantic thing. It's weird to think about, but I'm who knows, with Star Wars, it can be across the spectrum. So
Yep.
maybe Kylo and Rey are one end of the spectrum and Baby Yoda's on the other end, and who knows what that other end looks like.
Yeah,
Star Wars
exactly.
may not even know what that looks like yet.
Keep the shirt on there, Baby Yoda. Yeah. So I mean, but yeah, I mean, it could be very, very interesting, and you're right. We could end on a cliffhanger of who Baby Yoda is connected to in a dyad. The other thing to think about is, and the truth is, this is something that I've started to think about as we talk about the dyads. Of we don't want to have too many of these Baby Yodas, right? It starts to lose its exclusivity. It starts to. I mean, if Mandalorian brings Baby Yoda all the way back to all the Yoda race, that'd be cool. But then Baby Yoda becomes one of many, and then there's an exclusivity that gets lost here. So I wonder if they'd risk that in the end. Of course, maybe the series ends with him finally bringing Baby Yoda home, but still, I think it would be weird. I don't know. What's your thoughts? This is coming to me as we talk about it. What do you think about it?
No, I like it. I mean, so I get what you're saying. I think it could totally it could definitely end up taking away from the sort of preciousness of Baby Yoda a little bit, especially when you're talking about, fans that aren't fans yet, that are too young to watch The Mandalorian, that end up discovering it and watching it later in life. And then they're going to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and then there's blue, green, yellow, and pink Baby Yodas all over the place. It loses its novelty a little bit at that point. But I think that, the way that the producers are working on Mandalorian and the way that they're holding things back and they're being so disciplined, it seems like, I feel like I don't know if they would ever go that route. I think if they were going to be like, oh, we found the plan to Baby Yoda's, that's going to be the last 5 minutes of the last episode, maybe. I could be wrong. That's just my assumption, because they are being so tight-lipped and they do seem to be being very disciplined in their approach to this series, which I very much appreciate.
Right. It's the mystery of it all that'll keep you coming back, right? It's like the old sitcoms, will they or won't they type thing, when you have like Sam and Diane or whoever, I don't know, whatever your generation is that enjoys those sitcoms, like they will they or won't they kind of thing. So with this one, it's will he or won't he get the child, aka Baby Yoda, back to quote unquote his people or her people. Yeah, that's the thing that I find you want to maintain. You want to maintain that mystery for as many seasons as you can, and let them go on adventures. I mean, Lone Wolf and Cub, which is kind of essentially what this is based on, there were numerous adventures as they were trying to find where they were going to be next. Obviously that's father and son. This is a different situation, but you never know how much of that's going to bleed into this and become like an overall arc of an adventure, but then with mini adventures sprinkled throughout every season. So we shall see. We shall see. All right. Anyway, well, we should wrap up there. We're at 45 minutes. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of The Jedi Way. I always appreciate you all diving into the comment section and leaving us your ideas and your theories and your thoughts about the things that we brought up here. Let us know what you felt about the 1 minute teaser there. Let us know what you thought about both of these books and some of the concepts that have been presented, some of the fun tidbits from behind the scenes that we talked about. What do you want to see? What do you anticipate seeing in these books as well? And what do you want to see explored? Let us all know, and let us know how we're doing on the show as well. We've been doing it for a few weeks now. Let us know how this is going. What do you want us to cover? What concepts, what I don't know, theories, what stories do you want us to dive into on the show? We're still kind of building this thing out and shaving off the edges and getting it to where it needs to be. So let us know. We're always open to having these kinds of conversations and getting that kind of feedback.
Yeah, we're mixing it up, so the feedback is definitely welcome. Please comment below.
Absolutely. And Laura, how can they follow everything you're doing and listen to everything you got going on?
Sure. Come find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at @shutup_Laura. And then you can find my other show that I do with my friend Alice. Our podcast is Force Toast, a Star Wars happy hour, where we drink wine and talk about Star Wars. And you can follow that on Twitter as well. It's @ForceToastPod.
Someday I'm going to try to needle my way or weasel my way into being a guest on that show. And I'll be out on my backyard drinking wine with my cigar, talking Star Wars. One of these days, I will convince you and Alice to have me on the show down the road.
Hell yeah.
You can always follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram. And please remember to subscribe to this channel as well. So much content that covers all the bases that we have on here. Film, entertainment, television, Star Wars, sports, politics. It's all here on the Outlaw Nation channel as we build it out more and more step by step every day. So come aboard this train, subscribe, hit that bell so you're notified of every new video that pops up. And like I said, leave a comment down below, but also hit a like on this. A lot of you all, sometimes we'll do we did that first live show a couple of weeks ago. We'll be doing more of those. But when we have shows like this that are pre-recorded, it's really important for you to leave a comment and a like so it elevates the visibility of the show as well. And share it on your social media, please. When you share a show, you're telling your friends and your family or anyone else who follows you on your social media that you approve of this content, you like this content, and then maybe they'll take a chance on this content and come aboard and join us here on the Jedi Way, which would be great. All right, that's it from us, Laura. What do we got to tell them?
Until next time, dear friends, remember your focus determines your reality.
Always.